안녕 친구들. Hi. If you are just coming from watching the Goo Family Book video recap and then you see this thing on my head and you're wondering what on earth does that woman have on her head, let me explain. So this is in honor of the master's son, the whole wolf and the goat, and that, metaphor that keeps getting bandied about. Um, So what happened was, many of you know, or if you don't know, you're slowly starting to get a feel for what my personality is like, right? In my everyday life, I have to be serious, professional, what have you. So YouTube and Musings of a Twinkie, the blog, in itself is where I do a lot of romping, playing, I guess, reverting back to childhood or, my adolescence, if you will, and such. So anyhow, once a month, a number of my friends and I get together and we just do kind of a girls' night out kind of thing where we just go and have dinner, catch up with each other and things like that. And I think we live about, an hour from each other. And so very busy lives, as you all know. I mean, adult responsibilities and such. So I had never been to Daiso, Daiso, but it is, I believe, Hui had said that they have one in her country, which is Singapore. There's certainly one in Japan, of course, because that's where it originated. Daiso has gone into Korea, and now Daiso has arrived in Los Angeles. And so my younger sister had gone to the Daiso in LA. And then my friend, the one who usually orchestrates where we meet on these monthly girls' night outs, said, "Hey, there's one in Anaheim. Let's go. Let's meet there and go do Daiso." And so we're kind of going through, and I happen to see this, which I know it looks kind of like a lamb, but imagine, if you will, let's pretend that I'm a little baby goat, okay? And in reference to the whole wolf and goat. And so if you're wondering where my wolf is, hold on. Benny, agaba. Benny, come here. I want them to see you. Benny, 여기 와. Benny, 여기. Benny야, 여기 와. Oh, good boy. Come here, Benny. All right, hold on. Okay. There's my wolf, okay? Okay. So, not that you guys wanted to see my wolf. That's my wolf. Anyway, so let me go ahead and get started with the recap of episodes 14 and 15. I know, I'm silly, but this is what happens when you get to be a certain age, and then, you have to deal with adult things. And so when you get on YouTube or when you get into Korean drama land, which is in essence what I am enjoying right now, or where I'm frolicking, then we go and do silly things like fangirl or buy little things like this. Now, for those of you who are wondering, oh my gosh, this woman really? Rest assured, it's only for this video and maybe for the next video as I finish up the recaps of The Master's Son, because this is small enough that it's going to go to my niece, my 2-year-old niece, for Halloween, or for her to just have fun with. So, anyhow. Alright, let's get started. Oh, now you want to come, Bentley? Do you want to show them your face? Come here, you. Oh, you're skittish. Alright, so anyway, Bentley doesn't want to be on the video. Alright, so episodes 14 and 15, I think for the most part the internet world has exploded, or the K-drama world has exploded, with just recaps and recaps galore of episodes 14 and 15. And so, I mean, certainly on my blog site as well, I did a truncated version of episode 14, and I think, at least I'd like to think so, a little bit more thorough recap than usual of episode 15. And so what I'm going to do is, with this recap especially, because I am really trying to keep these at around 30 minutes, but you guys know, after watching so many of these with me, that I just tend to like to talk, especially, and hopefully if you keep coming back, you like hearing me talk, right? So thank you. Just a quick shout out to our, Sparkle. Hi, I'm so excited that you found me on YouTube and you're one of my YouTube viewers. You're awesome. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Episode 13, not 13, but 14. picks up on the rooftop of Kungshi's place, and she and Chungwon are talking, of course. And I will say 14 I loved, and the reason why is the show went back to what made it so great, which is to have as much screen time between Kongsil and Chungwon as possible. The show really shines when those two are at it, talking, exchanging barbs, and just throwing lines at each other and so on. But anyway, he asks her, I hear that you've been going around saying that I'm a special person to you. What was I to you? And Kongshi pretty much says, kind of take a look and make your own, the obvious conclusions. I'm a poor woman, you're a rich, guy. What else do you think could have been between us? And then Chungwon, very classic Chungwon, taking us, and like I said before, the Hong sisters are really great at revisiting scenes, revisiting lines. I think more so than any other writer that I know in Korean drama land, they do that really well. And so Chungwon says, very, reminiscent of, I think it was episode 2, he's like, do you own this building? Because in his mind, that's the only reason why he could possibly, right? And I love the pun of the yukam, which, can be sixth sense, but at the same time, it can also be like sex appeal or physical attractiveness, right? But anyway, Kongshil says, he actually says the word candy. So he's like, so you were candy and I was Hulk. And she was like, pretty much. And she said, we decided to end it. You got hurt, decided to end it and all of this stuff. And I love Chungwon's whole thing. He's like, fine, then if that's the case, then let's resume. And when I have you in my arms, maybe memory will like come back to me. And she very, what's the word I'm looking for? She very, I can't think of the word. She throws off his hand basically and says, don't touch me. It's ended and things like that. And Chungwon makes this very interesting point, which I think is true. He says, look, if that's the type of situation we really had, then the relationship ends from my end, typically not yours and such. And so at that point, Kongshin knows that she needs to, he's not going to go away easily. And she tells him, well, there was something that you left behind. She goes in. And then that's where we then get a glimpse of, seriously, even though she keeps this very strong, straight face in front of him when she's by herself, she allows herself to deal with the pain and the energy it takes for her to have to present that type of face before him, right? She sinks to the floor and then, clutching the refrigerator, and then she opens the refrigerator, takes out the 6-pack, and it's just so... Your heart really does go out to her because she's clutching the beer can. And then she collects herself, goes back, and gives him the beer can. And Chungwon looks at this, and he knows that there's more to it. But he says, if this is the extent that you and I played at, then thank you for leaving, and thank you for returning me back, And there's that double entendre. The Korean language, sometimes, especially with English too, I mean, depending on how you phrase it, that there are ways that we phrase certain things to imply double or multiple meanings, right? Same with the Korean language. And so he says, and 돌려줘서 고마워, or something like that. It basically can imply thank you for returning the beer can, because they don't really use direct objects or things like that. Or it could also mean thank you for returning me back to my place. So Chungwon leaves knowing that there's more, but he's content because he likes, even though there's been a lot of changes, he's content with that. He's okay. He doesn't mind it. I mean, he no longer hates Hichu. He can read and so on, right? Anyway, so then the episode continues, and there's all these moments where they just can't help but continue to come together. And I love the fact that even though he can't remember, they are really forced together in a number of respects. And the great development, I think, with episode 14 as one of the side stories is this relationship between the VP and Chungwon, this little frenemy thing, right? So although there's a part of the VP who is still intent on putting Chungwon at disadvantage. And I think to a certain extent, he really is just wanting Chungwon to acknowledge him as 고모부, right? Or the uncle-in-law, but Chungwon's not. And, there's not that much age difference between the two. And incidentally, just kind of for those of you who are interested. I had thought when I saw this that those two may have worked together in the past. And then I was actually going through a bunch of clips over the weekend while I was working out, doing some, random odd things here and there. And I think I may have alluded to the fact in one of my blog posts that 소지섭, I had seen 소지섭 first in 미안하다 사랑한다, I love you, I'm sorry, I love you, or something like that. I love you, or I'm sorry, I forget which one. They used to call it Lisa, so I guess it's I'm sorry and then I love you. But I wasn't that thrilled with his character, right? Because I could see that he was very, like a very attractive character. I think it was like Wheel or something, but I wasn't really all that fond of him. And so then when Law Firm, I ended up getting a chance to see Law Firm. I saw it because, Song Soo-hoon was the one headlining that, and I wasn't impressed. And honestly, at that point, the only thing that kept me watching that show were those brief glimpses of Seo Ji-seop's character, because he was this very preppy, like smart, young, dashing, like lawyer, right? And so anyway, as I was watching a clip, I was like, oh wait, the VP, they were together, and it's really cute. So just kind of for those of you who are looking to watch more Seo Ji-seop stuff, he was in a minor role in a drama series called Law Firm, and then you'll see the VP, the actor, with Seo Ji-seop's character as well. So they've known each other professionally for a while, which I thought was really cool. But anyway, so back to the whole thing. Jung-won then starts to kind of piece things together with the VP's help and so on. And then we see in episode 14 really the progression of how Jung-won pieces Kong-shi's involvement with him together. And so, I mean, ultimately in the middle of the episode, we have Kang-woo apprehending, very perceptively noticing the child, hit and run guy come into Kingdom, go into Kong-shi's office. And so he tackles him down, captures him, and while they're holding him, waiting for the police to come get him, Jung-won comes in, and Jung-won's like, were you the one who, stabbed me? And the guy's like freaking out because he just wants to talk to Tae Gong-shi, because ever since Gong-shi had told him that child you killed, even though it was by accident, he's watching you. And ever since then, the man can't sleep or do anything, right? And so he's like, I just want to talk to that woman. Please let me see that woman. And then Jung-won comes in and he's like, did you try to kill me? And the guy's like, no, it wasn't by, it wasn't on purpose. I was actually trying to get the, girl. And I'm like that makes it any better, right? But, Jung-won at that point had only known that he had just followed Tae Gong-shi there. He didn't realize that he had gotten stabbed, throwing himself in front of her so that he got stabbed. And so, he's a pretty smart man. He starts to piece things together, and he's like, okay, so, and you can see his like headgears like shifting into overdrive. He's like, so I don't get it. Not only did I go there with her, but then I jumped in front of her and took what in order to protect her. And then the VP, for his part, tries to deny it, but then Kang-woo, and I really have to appreciate Kang-woo's character. I know that some of you may not like Kang-woo as a second lead because he's very, he doesn't say anything really, and he just kind of watches from the sidelines as a way to protect her and such. But I like the fact that Kang-woo acknowledges that he doesn't have a place in Kong-shi's life unless she invites him. Do you know what I mean? Although some of you may be like, yeah, but be a little assertive, man, and get in there and really give Jung-won a run for his money. But anyway, so you see Kang-woo's hands kind of like clench as he's about to divulge a very pertinent piece of information to Jung-won. And, I'm sure a part of him is like, don't tell him, because it's just going to get them back together. But on the other hand, I think there's a sense of honor in Kang-woo that insists that he tell Jung-won and all of this stuff. So anyway, he tells Jung-won, yes, it's true, you stepped in front to protect her. And at that point, Jung-won just gets thrown for a loop. And so basically what happens is he calls Gong-shi, and the cute thing is Gong-shi has been avoiding his phone calls, and she doesn't answer when he tries to come. at her door and knock and stuff. So he texts her a message pretending that he is Secretary Kim, right? And so she comes to Kingdom and she's like, Kim 실장님, and she's like, Kim 실장님. And then he kind of slowly opens a door. So it looks like it's creaked open, and he sends her a message saying, hey, I'm at Kingdom, can you please come? I have something to discuss with you or ask you, right? And so she walks in thinking that Kim 실장님 is in Jungwon's office, and then he closes the door. And then she's like, oh, it's you. And he's like, yeah, well, you keep avoiding my phone calls, and you won't answer the door when I come, so thought I would, send a message via pretending to be Secretary Kim. He's like, and the look of pride and smugness on his face as he says, I can text now, right? He's like, so I figured something out and I want to kind of run it by you. And he's like, I love his little hand actions, and I'm sure many of you appreciate that as well. But so they sit, and honestly, when he said, come, sit down, a part of me, and maybe you were like this too, I was expecting him to sit her down on that big huge sofa, and then him to sit on his like big huge ridiculous looking armchair, and he doesn't. He places her on this little chair, right? And so she sits there, and I really have to say, for me, that was such a pivotal moment, that scene, because as he's trying to figure this out and he lays it out, and for Kongshil's part, she doesn't lie. She tells him the truth as much as she is comfortable telling him, which I love. One of the things that I appreciate about the Hong sisters stories that at least I've seen, and I haven't seen very many, but the ones that I have seen, there's not a whole lot of lying involved, which I appreciate. If there is any lying involved, it's really lies by omission in a sense. So, when things are told point blank, Kongshu will, when she's asked point blank, Kongshu will either not answer the question or answer it in a way that deflects that question. But anyway, so, Jungwon runs through the events and he says, so I flatlined. I know you can see ghosts. Oh, and one of the scenes that I forgot to mention was the fact that Kongshil is now fully in the services of Madame Go, or, Koyosa, right? And so she gets sent on these cemetery trips to try to collect eligible, young ladies and such, because there's like a shortage of them in, Madame Go's business. So anyway, one of the consulting jobs that Kongshil has to do is that this man who is scheduled to get married next week keeps dreaming of his ex-fiancée who died. She keeps popping up in his dream, and so he's like, what's going on? And then Kongshil tells him that the woman's there because he had promised her that he would be with her forever, right? And so the guy very typically says, huh, I just said that, but I guess she really believed it and took it to heart, right? So as Koyosa goes out, she ends up running into Jungwon's aunt, who happens to be there, and with Hanna, of course, about to meet Jungwon for lunch. And then the aunt ends up finding out from Koyosa that Kongshil really is being used, for her services and things like that, right? So the aunt apparently invites the Koyosa to come with Kongshil afterwards. Well, what happens is, during that time that they're having that discussion, Kongshil is still at that table trying to tell the guy, yeah, your ex-fiance's or ex-girlfriend's ghost is actually right next to you. Well, Jungwon walks by, happens to see that, and he thinks, oh, she's moved on to be another Candy to another man. And he just kind of doesn't, he's about to walk by. And then, of course, the man gives this loud laugh, right? A nervous laugh, but still. And to Jungwon's ears, it totally grates, because it's like that time when, remember, Kangwoo had told Kongshil, okay, I'll wait for you outside. And Jungwon had seen that, and he was like, and then he was about to walk away, but then something about that situation pulled him back. And then when he went back, Kongshil was like fixing her hair. Yeah, the infamous hair that he had, made fun of. And he got totally jealous. Same thing happens, of course, right? And so even though I didn't like the whole amnesia, plot device, I did enjoy it for the sense that the Hong sisters used that really to take us back to what it was like, to remind us that, now that we know the, Jungwon, who has the memories, is, fully in love with Kongshil and such. But by taking us back, it reminds us again that even though Chungwon doesn't have those memories, he's still attracted to her and all of those things, right? But I love how there's this inherent misunderstanding. And so when the man says, because Kongshi's like, oh, he was in the same situation like you, he says, so will she really, get lost as she promises and all of this stuff? And Chungwon thinks that it's a candy situation, of course, right? So then he's like, oh, I don't know if I should tell you. And the thing before he does that is that he puts his hand on Kumshit and says, is our candy lonely and sad here too? And then, she kind of brushes, she, what is it? Flings his arm off saying, I'm working. And, the double entendre again here is, I'm hitting on this man, right? 작업 중이에요. She's like, don't touch me. And I do love the fact that every time he tries touching her, she's very vehemently opposed to that, and she tells him very clearly. And every time she says that, with his look, you know that even though he may not remember it, his body certainly does, and his heart takes kind of a hit anytime she tells him, I don't want you touching me, right? But anyway, Chungwon's playfulness, ever, present, starts to make quite the thing, because he then says, I don't know if I should tell you, but she only left after I almost died. And then he tells him about this big screwdriver and all of this stuff, right? So the guy freaks out and he leaves. And then Kongshi's like, no, you're misunderstanding. But just a lot of fun, cute moments there. But anyway, so Kongshi's about to leave, but then Koyosa says there's someone that you need to meet. And, Kongshi's like, there's always someone important that you want me to meet. But she goes there, and of course, it's Chungwon, and the aunt pretty much says, do you really see ghosts? And to Kongshi's testament, she very confidently, and I love how that type of confidence, or her resolve to still be truthful in that type of embarrassing situation that is really designed to humiliate her. It really says something about her fundamental, core character, and what she really could have been like had she not had that accident. Because when she and Kangwoo are really talking, she, just very blatant, nonchalantly does say, I was the type of person, when there was an award, I swept through all the awards. I was at the top of my class, and, I was really headed towards being someone really important. And she's not bragging, it's just kind of a fact for her. But anyway, so during that scene, of course, she then says, yes, I do see a ghost. And then she says Chaiju, which totally freaks out Hiju, who we find out is, the real Hiju, who assumed her sister's life, and then Chungwon, right? So at that point, Chungwon drags her out, and then she flings his arm away again and says, don't touch me, I'm in the middle of, working. And then that's when Koyosa realizes, because she can sense when the spirits go away, right? She just can't see them. And then that's when Koyosa realizes why Chungwon is so important to Kongshi. But anyway, Chungwon takes her out, and that's when Kongshi very, again, kind of matter-of-factly says, oh, you thought Candy was cute, but the story of ghosts is a little scary, huh? It would have been nice if you didn't need to know this. And then she very matter-of-factly tells him, yeah, you set up an office for me. All of those special guests, VIP guests, were ghosts, and so on and so forth. And then as Chungwon's trying to grab hold of her to continue to talk, she flings his arm and says, don't touch me. Next time we meet, let's pretend we don't know each other. And so the next time that they do meet, there's this kind of like moment where he sees her and he wants to kind of see what, because what happens is, I know it's a little bit discombobulating the way I'm telling today's recap, but so going back to when he, text messages her, and then she shows up, and then he pieces together the fact that when he flatlined, his spirit did go to see her, right? And then she tells him, and my blog has the whole like detailed stuff, but she tells him, what I saw there freaked me out. Like what you said freaked me out. And so he's like, well, what did I say? Did I say that, I'm going to resent you and haunt you for the rest of my life because you made me die? And she's like, no. And he's like, then did I say I wanted you to die with me? And she's like, no. And then at that point, he realizes very clearly how far he had gone in terms of his emotional involvement with her, right? So and I love this scene because literally her face is here and his face mere inches away from her. And he says, are you okay with that, not having that? Because she says, because he looks at her and he's like, if I look at you this closely, at least one iota of memory of when I was deliriously happy with you should float into my mind, but why can't I remember a single thing? And she says, you don't have to worry, your memories are sealed. You're not ever going to recover them. And then he looks at her and he's like, are you okay with that? And she says, I'm okay with that. And then he, of course, says, fine, if you're okay with it, then I don't need to find it, right? And as she walks away stoically, trying to move on because, and this is what I think the show did really well. No matter how much she's hurting, the overriding thing that freaks her out is the fact that she doesn't ever want to see Chungwon's spirit ever in front of her again. So no matter what other scary spirits are before her, they don't matter because in her mind she keeps thinking of that. She's like, this is bearable compared to that. But anyway, she walks away. Chungwon looks at her and he says, if you're not okay, just turn back once and I'll start to look again one more time. And of course she doesn't, and then, he feels the hurt and stuff. Well, the next time they meet is at the Palace Hotel celebration, one of the big events. And you have to remember, I think it was episode 11, when the giant CEO had died, and at the funeral, Chungwon had introduced Kongshi to the Palace CEO as his girlfriend, and the Palace CEO guy had said, oh, next time we have a company event, you should bring your girlfriend over. Well, Chungwon doesn't remember any of this, so Hannah, of course, gets invited to go. And, of course, throughout the whole time, Chungwon's looking at her necklace and stuff. Kind of ignoring, but being, drawn to the necklace. Well, as he's about to go up the escalator to the party, he happens to see Hongshi, who was there to kind of finish up her business with the guy with the ex-girlfriend's ghost thing. And as their eyes meet, he looks at her very sternly because he's still peeved that not only does she tell him to keep getting lost, but that she doesn't want him to ever recover his, memory, and that she's okay. And so he's now at a point where even though he doesn't remember, he's miffed now that she's okay not having that relationship. And then, true to her word, where Kongshi says she doesn't want to have anything to do with him, she kind of covers her sun pendant and then she turns. Okay? And so at that point, you see his face completely just like that impotent fury, and I'm just like, wow, I'm so glad I'm not at the, I'm not the target of that look. And then wordlessly he goes up that escalator, and then Kongshi, of course, is left to deal with still those residual emotions. And then Chaiju shows up, continues to ask her, can I borrow your body? Can I borrow your body? And so Kongshi and she end up going upstairs. Well, when Chungwon gets to the party, of course the VP, his little frenemy, shows up and he says, hey, by the way, I saw Kongshi downstairs in the lobby or wherever, and, your aunt tells me that she's entered into this weird contract with the ghost matchmaker. And Chungwon's like, I'm not I don't care. And then he's like, aunt? And I love that, how he can't help but want to hear. And then he fills him in, that Chungwon had, not Chungwon, but Kongshi has this weird contract with the ghost lady. And so then we see Chungwon go, and, it's this really cute thing because he's just so like, anyway. So Chungwon says, how much is she contracted? How much was the contract and all of this stuff? Because he at least wants to release Kongshi of that contract, right? And earlier on in the episode, we had seen Kangwoo really kind of quietly follow Kongshi through the cemetery as his way of like bodyguarding her, right? But anyway, so Chungwon's like, how much was the contract? And the woman, won't say. And then Chungwon says something like, speaking of which, the memory, can it be recovered? And then the Ghostmaker, the Ghostmaker, and I think that was what I really appreciated, because no matter how creepy that ghost matchmaker is, she is still a matchmaker, and there's a part of her that really wants Kongshi and Chungwon to get together, right? And you see how when Chungwon's like, no, I'm not interested because I don't want to have to deal with the complications of whatever I said, because when I thought I was dying and I had nothing to lose, I spat out some words that I don't want to have to deal with. And then the ghost maker says, yes. And that word that you carelessly said, supposedly, she has swept in and she's now dealing with. And, Chungwon says, I know. And that's why I want to at least release her from this contract, right? And the woman says, I understand. You continue to be your happy self then, because your Taeyang, your son, isn't worth your level, right? Or at your level for you to even consider her. And I love the word that she uses, right? 초라해. But anyway, so Chungwon continues to press her. How much, does she owe you, that kind of thing? How much is the contract? And the phrasing of this is, she has given up her entire self. And that whole, idea that Gongshi really is the wolf. Ultimately, she has given up her entire self to protect Chungwon, to bring him back. And at that point, Chungwon's face completely just is rocked by that admission. So anyway, he goes back to the party, and then he realizes that, he does want to eventually. And so he looks at the hand, and of course he sees the pendant, and because the ghost matchmaker told him how to find his memory again, right? Of course, Hannah's there. He looks at Hannah's thing, and then he realizes that was what was in his hand. He recovers his memory, and then he's about to go and recover what he lost. And then Hannah's like, Chungwon, wasn't I the one that you had kept seeing and stuff? And I love his comment to her. He's like, it looks the same, but it's not the real one. It's not the genuine, artifact. Which, for us as viewers, because Hannah Brown, earlier on in the episode, when she found out that Gongshi can see, the dead Chaiju's ghost, you hear her say, if you're next to me right now, then I'm sorry for the way it turned out on me, right? And when she said that, I think a number of viewers missed the reference to that, but Hannah Brown is the Onni. And so as soon as she said that, I was like, oh my gosh, that woman has swapped. She ended up kidnapping Hiju, like she ended up kidnapping her real sister and Chungwon. So Hannah Brown really did think that she was kidnapped, right? And it's only at the very end when, Hiju unmasks herself and looks at her sister as she's kind of, hurt in the car, that she tells her, just die there, let me live your life, die there, because if you don't, I will ultimately kill Chungwon. And so in an ultimate, I guess, love and sacrifice for her sister, Hiju had just taken the fall and died there. So it was her way of protecting Hiju as well as Chungwon, because she knew that her sister would continue to go after Chungwon. And the extent, or the extent of Hiju's depravity, I think, really strikes at what kind of, that whole issue of nurture versus nature. And so, whether it's she got all of the evil, twin attributes or whatnot, the environment certainly played a significant role in making Hiju the way she is, a woman who is just not content with what she has, always wanting more and more, coveting other people's things and such. But anyway, so Chungwon goes to find Gongshi. He, of course, just perfectly finds her at the rooftop, just as Gongshi is about to throw the pendant away to show Hiju that she no longer cares about Chungwon and she's ready to end things. And then Chungwon whips her around and he's like, are you really going to be okay with that, your Pangomo? And she's like, and then that's how episode 14 ends, right? One thing that I did want to broach, and before I get on to episode 15, is this whole idea. And I know when you watch a piece of fiction, there should be, as Samuel Coleridge says, a willing suspension of disbelief, right? However, how can one possibly explain how Hiju, who was raised under very unfortunate circumstances in an orphanage, assume Hannah Brown's life? Because Hannah Brown was adopted as an infant by the Browns, right? She's been all over. Her father is British, so of course she would know British English. How on earth would Hiju then have been able to assume that? And, it just boggles the mind, the logistics of that whole thing. But I don't know, maybe she pretended that she had amnesia, or maybe she just pretended that she was so traumatized and didn't talk until really she was able to learn the language. Who knows? But you guys get my point, right? It just, anyway. And here's the other thing for some people who are like, well, maybe she learned the English in Korea. I will tell you, the English that's taught in Korea is American or Canadian English. It's not British English. So, yeah, you guys get my point, right? Anyway, yes, I know. When you watch these things, willing suspension of disbelief. I know. So willing suspension of disbelief. Anyway, we move on to episode 15. They have this conversation on the rooftop, and I love how Chuma's like, I didn't want to find it, but I found it. And then Kongshi's like, if you didn't want to find it, why did you find it? I was okay without you and all of this stuff. And then she gives him the necklace back, and she tells him that, I wasn't waiting for you to recover your memories. I actually was going to throw this away. And I didn't want you to ever find your memories. And then at that point, Chumon starts to figure things out a little bit, right? So, of course, petty Chumon, playful Chumon that he is, he says, then you're going to be okay if I throw it away. And she's like, that's fine. And then he goes over to the, railing to throw it away. And then Kongshi, again, since he can't see her face crunches up and she rushes away to kind of, she doesn't want to be there. And I think, honestly, the dynamics and the strength of the drama really rests with those two actors because they're able to go back and forth from the dramatic to the comedic so effortlessly. Nuances of their facial expressions and things like that. So, anyway, very, very typically Chungwon, right? And I love how he's so playful in this episode. He fakes this huge back, like pain spasm episode thing. He's like, ah! Which, calls Kongshi back, right? Because Chungwon's about to throw it and he looks just like a little kid, right? To see if she's watching and to gauge her reaction. And then, of course, when she doesn't, he, fakes this huge, painful, cry, which is obviously fake. But anyway, Kongshi runs back to him. She's like, are you okay? Are you hurt? And he's like, do I look like I'm hurt? Have you ever been stabbed by a screwdriver? And he's like, that screwdriver came this close to, piercing my heart and all of this stuff, right? And then he uses that opportunity to, hold her close to him and all of this stuff. And it's just incredibly adorable and they bitter and stuff like that. So, here's the thing. As fun as it is, I'm going to fast forward through because I'm already at 37 minutes into this recap and I really want to make this recap relatively within at least 45 minutes, right? Anyway, so long story short, he tries to convince her. He talks her into driving him home, and there's this really cute scene in the parking lot where he kind of fingers her hair a little bit. And I think one of my blog readers said that she swooned. Yeah, it's a very cute scene. I agree. And then when they get to his apartment, he wants to renegotiate the terms of their agreement, or he feels like they need to kind of sort things through, right? And I love how in the midst of that, it's just so cute, but in the midst of that, the conclusion is Kongshi says, I don't want you to come down to my level. I don't want to renegotiate, or I don't want you to try to match yourself to me. She said, I told you I'm not interested in that. And she walks out. And then Chungwon's like, what? Okay, fine. Go. Let me take a look in the mirror, kind of find some things that might attract you, and then I'll come renegotiate with you at that point. And then, of course, in a huff, he goes back to the hotel, talks to the, matchmaker. He gets Kongshi released, and I love the terms of his release. He says, if you ever, because he says, name your price. And I love how, for him, that implies Kongshi is priceless, right? And I thought that was really nice touch, nicely phrased. But the ghost consultant is like, you've come to the exact calculation, I see. And he says, if you ever think about drawing her back into your world, I'll play the spiritual matchmaker this time and arrange for your wedding. And he's like, and for that to happen, you'd have to die. And that's very, even though that he's not, no, he's pretty serious about that, I think. So, Yeah, he wants her dead if he ever, if she ever messes with Kung-che. And so I really do love the fact that both men, Kang-woo and Chung-won, they really want to do their part in trying to keep Kung-che as safe as possible. Of course, Kang-woo does it from a distance, and he won't intercede unless Kung-che asks. Whereas Chung-won, he's like, forget it, I'm not gonna wait until I can't let you go into places like that of your own. And so, after she's been released from the contract, he goes to like see her at her rooftop, and it's just this cute little scene. Um, just a lot of revisits of earlier references, dialogues, and scenes and things like that. I mean, there's one where he's like, when a ghost pops up, he's like, "What are you doing? Tell her to come back later. We're having this serious conversation, right?" And just a whole bunch of stuff. But basically, Jung-won realizes throughout the episode that Kung-soo's serious. That the thing that freaked her out is his dying, and no matter what her current life is, that alone was enough that she doesn't want to ever have. And Chung-won at that point thinks that he can continue to push and push and try to get her to, like fall for him and give up this whole thing about, distance and stuff. But ultimately what happens by the end is, and I'm skipping a lot of stuff, but I'm sorry. But they are able to get Hee-ju, because Secretary Kim comes back, and then he's able to find the necklace in the crematorium area, and then they break it, and of course they find it, and all of the stuff. But I make so much sense. I know. I'm sorry. But anyway, Chung-won finds out that his real first love had actually been Hannah Brown, and that he had hated the wrong person for the past 15 years, unjustly and things like that. But in the midst of that, after Hee-ju is apprehended with enough evidence within 2 days of the statute of limitation ending and all of this stuff, right? And you guys, those of you who read my blog, you know that for me, I was disappointed because after the build-up, and it wasn't even so much, okay, it was the build-up, yes, but knowing what we knew about Hee-ju's vindictive character and her desire for things that she couldn't have, I mean, to the point where she, in essence, killed her older sister just so that she could have her life, on the threat that if she didn't die, she would end up killing Chung-won. And she ended up kidnapping her own sister too. And I mean, if Chung-won was that traumatized, you have to wonder how traumatized was Hannah, right? That's not even really touched upon, but how traumatized must Hannah have been as she's being driven, in that car chase, and then how shocked and, to realize that the person who put her through that entire ordeal was her own flesh and blood, her twin sister that she had come to try to love and to find and reconnect with, right? And so it definitely says something about Hannah Brown's character to be able to take the fall like that for both those two people. But anyway, so after Chung-won finds that out, and Hee-ju, because I honestly was expecting some bigger like scheme, much more diabolic scheme from Hee-ju, so it was a little bit of a letdown. Not that I minded really, that their thing just ended really quickly. But anyway, at the end of that, Kong-sil and Chung-won end up talking outside. Kong-sil allows Hee-ju possession of her body so that Hannah Brown and Chung-won can say their last goodbyes. And then Hannah Brown disappears in peace. And at that point, Kong-sil tells him, I think my lot in life is just to shine really brightly for spirits, for ghosts, because she had said when you were a ghost and you came to me, you said that I shined really brightly as a sun, right? And for her that was verification, probably the first verification that Madame Go's comment about how she shines brightly actually was true, because Chung-won got to see that, right? And she says this very beautifully heart-wrenching statement where she says, but when I see you or when I'm next to you, instead of that, all I see is this very, dangerous sun that can kill people. And she says that scares me. And, it's not even so much scares, it terrifies her. And that it makes her hate herself, right? And so at that point, I think Chungwon, for his part, had felt as though he could keep pursuing her and try to wear down her defenses as long as it was just her trying to just avoid another life and death situation, because he's figuring I can just wear her down, and as long as we avoid it, it should be okay. But when he realizes that Gongshi is frightened, but not only frightened, but that being with him makes her hate herself or what she can be to him, at that point then I think he's willing to put the brakes on whatever emotions and desires that he has for her sake. And so the episode ends with him kind of, letting her go, saying, "Get lost, Taeyeon." And of course, I'm sure all of you who watched that, it was beautifully done. But then as he watches her, and of course the requisite, 3 shots, as Kongshid turns away. Literally, I was like, 1, 2. I'm like, there's the third, right? Because, that's one of the, I think, classic Korean filming conventions now, right? That there's all these 3 shots of the same thing. But as Juan watches her, he says, if she really gets lost like this, the literal translation is "I'll fall into ruin." But the contextual or the smoother translation is that without her, this will be the end of me, right? And so the episode ends like that. And what I didn't mention is that in episode 15, Gongshil meets a man named Yu Jin-woo, who can see and hear ghosts very much like her, and he was actually the one responsible for finding her when she had been lost in the mountains for 10 days. Because the spirit or the ghost of Gongshi had found him and then shown him where she was. And then in the 3 years thereafter, as she lay on the hospital bed, her body was totally okay. But what she had done was she had gone romping throughout the world because he's a photographer, and she had just romped with him all that time. And so at first when I watched it, I thought, oh, because were they romantically involved in some way, even though he was, flesh and blood and she was spirit at that point. But on a rewatch, I don't think that's necessarily what happened, because when you listen to Chinu's conversation with Chunseok, who is the coffee-loving ghost, there's not this real desire for him to get back together. I think something's gonna happen, unless with the extension, which I hear is a legitimate extension. We'll see. I won't believe it until I see it, okay? But if it is a legitimate extension, whether the Home Sisters are then going to use that to kind of morph it into a romantic relationship. I didn't feel as though it really was a romantic relationship, though, when I was rewatching that scene to recap. I think certainly there's a part of him that wants to take her to all of those places as a way of perhaps bonding with her and helping her accept her new role, maybe, because I think Gongshil at this point she's accepted her role, and I don't think she's going to go back to living a normal life. And you guys know me, academic that I am. When I realized that, I was like, no, go back to school, finish that last semester of school. What are you doing? But I think Gongshil is realizing that this is kind of her destiny, and so she's going to be embracing that. Anyway, I don't think it's going to be a romantic relationship, really, because the way Chinu asks Junseok, if she goes with me, it'll be easier for her to break off things with that man, right? And then he asks Junseok, so you've seen them together. What do you think will happen at the end? Which I thought was very cute, because I'm like, yes, thank you for voicing exactly our question, right? But yeah, I don't think they're romantically involved. And I don't know. We have what, 2 days before episode 16 airs to speculate all we want about what's going to happen in episode 16. whether she's actually going to be able to go with Chinu on that trip, or whether Chungwon's going to be like, I let you go for 5 minutes, race after her, grab her and say, I can't let you go, come back, kind of thing. But you know, as I mentioned on the blog, I just hope that they don't do, you know, however many months later or however many years later, because I don't know, to me it feels like an easy cop out, you know. And the Holmes sisters consistently throughout this entire series hasn't really allowed, especially in the cliffhangers, to allow that much time to lapse. Have you guys noticed that? The cliffhanger of one episode in the beginning of the next one picks up right at that moment, which I've appreciated, because a lot of series will then, you know, kind of leave you at that cliffhanger and then, you know, move on to the next scene, right? So here's hoping, okay? And we're at 50 minutes. I gotta stop. I hope you guys enjoyed my little goat ears. Alright, take care everyone. We'll see. Hopefully this video uploads before I have to go to work. So, alright, take care everyone. Bye.